Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the rather lengthy dinner that Boris Johnson and Ursula von der Leyen had last night in Brussels, the new final, absolutely definitely final deadline that they both agreed, and what it all means realistically for a no-deal Brexit. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, Johnson flew to Brussels last night. As is typical of his complete lack of attention to detail, he even managed to cock up his photo ops. Now, bear in mind that Brexit is all about symbolism. There's no logic to it. It's all very emotive, all very symbolic. And that Johnson had spent the day shagging the flag in Parliament. You'd have thought that he'd have carried that symbolism on to his trip to Brussels. For example, do you remember when he had that plane painted at great public expense, hundreds of thousands of pounds, with a giant Union flag splashed all across it? Well, surely he took that plane for this trip. Then you look at the official photo op of him getting on board the plane, and I thought to myself, they've cocked up there. We can't see the Union flag on it, can we? Then we go, hang on a minute, that's not the same plane. That's not even that plane. So he used a load of our money, taxpayer money, to repaint a plane for jingoistic jaunts around the world, which he hardly ever takes. You know, like in America, it's understood you have the Air Force One because the American president needs that even just to travel around America. Gets used a lot. We don't really have a lot of need for our prime ministers to go on a plane. So just the idea of having one set aside for him, which we don't have, by the way, seemed a bit silly. But then when he does need to use it, to not even use that one? What the hell? It was a jingoistic move to go on jingoistic jaunts, and this was the most jingoistic jaunt of them all, and he didn't take it. Then, for good measure, the final leg of his journey to his dinner date, which had to take place in a car, of course, he did in a German car. But that's just classic lack of attention to detail that characterises Boris Johnson. The content of the dinner itself, of course, we are led to believe is more important. And of course, it's not true. You know, deals, obviously they need political approval, but deals are arranged not by politicians. You don't actually let politicians negotiate, good God. Those are negotiators that deal with that. But what was needed here was political movement. So the dinner was all important. After all, von der Leyen was hardly going to notice the lack of British symbolism in his arrival and take it as a hint, oh, he's not coming in his Union flag plane. Oh, he's not come in a British car. That must mean he's ready to do a deal. No, she wouldn't have thought that. Naturally, Johnson didn't come back with an agreement, nor did he come back saying that there would be no deal. You know, he and the EU Commission President have jointly agreed that the final, absolutely final, with a cherry on top deadline is coming this Sunday, December the 13th. When you think about it, is 1 year to the day that Boris Johnson formally got his majority in the general election that allowed him to deliver the no-deal Brexit that he promised was impossible. Which will, of course, mean Boris Johnson will do exactly that. Which should please him, I guess. I mean, after all, what egomaniac doesn't like achieving the impossible? And a no-deal Brexit, in his own words, was impossible. Of course, this is just another example of kicking the can down the road. You know, giving it a few more days to get us a deal. I mean, I'd be in favour of that if that is what it took. A deal, even a weak one, is of course better than nothing. It will save some businesses. It will save some jobs. It will even save some lives. But this isn't a few more days to give a deal a chance. You know, without ruling anything out. I mean, you can't rule anything out with Brexit. It's so emotive. I mean, let's just consider this. So let's imagine, do it the other way around, like a proof by contradiction. Let us imagine that at some point in the next 3 days, a deal were announced. Boris Johnson would deprive himself of the symbolic return from Brussels, holding in his hand a piece of paper. If he wanted a deal, and he was prepared to accept the terms that come with a trade deal, he would have announced it last night. You know, bear in mind that if he did back down and get a deal, he would present it back home as the EU backing down and him getting us a great deal. He'd claim that his personal intervention is what persuaded the EU Commission President to compromise, and his sheer force of will emphasised the sovereignty of dear old Blighty, to which the EU had no answer but to back down and agree to his terms. That wouldn't be what would happen, but that's what he would say. And that's how it would play out in the Daily Express and others, just like it did with the withdrawal agreement last year. Exactly the same, no different. But no, if a deal is agreed now, yes, we'd understand that he must have authorised it. We're not saying he'd have no role in it. But he wouldn't have been the one to provide the final key to unlock the deal, because the people now talking about a deal is not Boris Johnson. It's his own negotiators with the EU's negotiators. So no, Johnson wouldn't have wasted that dinner last night on coming away with just another deadline if he intended to deal this year. So although I can't rule anything out, again, I cannot rule out the notion that he thought he would get a deal, that he thought he would get the EU to back down, that he does want a deal, that he doesn't want to end the year without a deal, and that there's going to come a point where he realises that EU are not going to back down, and he panics. I can't rule that out. I just don't think that's now likely with the timing. So, yeah, I can't see a deal emerging this weekend at all. It was difficult enough to see it emerging after last Friday's collapse of talks, because that's another thing to consider. The negotiating teams both agreed, both of them on both sides, that there was nothing more for them to do unless there was political movement. That remains the case now, because there haven't been political movement. They aren't idiots, these negotiators. Even on the UK side, they're not idiots. If they'd done as much as they could within the parameters set by their political masters, if they'd done as much as they could by last Friday, and there hasn't been a change in those parameters, there's nothing more for them to do. The situation remains the same. There hasn't been political movement. There's not been a single report of anything being agreed further after that dinner last night. In fact, all of the reports are talking about the fact that there's no, there are still these differences remaining. There was no little ray of sunshine given. There was no, we've agreed on this, or we've come closer to this, or we've had this other idea that we both think is a useful avenue of discussion. None of that. I've not seen any language like that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I've not seen anything. So what does that mean for the talks taking place today? It's just going to be drinking coffee and eating biscuits. What else are they going to do? The various teams are going to meet and they're going to go, well, here are our papers, they're yours. Okay, they're the same as last week's. Yeah, okay. Do you have a game of hangman? Unless Johnson shifts later today, the same will be true of tomorrow's talks and of Saturday's. I'm not sure if there's any talks on Sunday, because when they say the deadline is Sunday, I don't know whether they mean the day itself is the deadline, or at some point in Sunday. Is there a time or something? I don't know. But again, this idea of needing a deal before December the 31st is, of course, Johnson's deadline. Remember, the EU had nothing to do with setting that date. So if there needs to be a definitive right, it's a no-deal Brexit now, that will have to come from Boris Johnson. Because if we don't get agreement this week, next month, the EU will keep talking. I mean, that's another issue that I'm going to talk about tomorrow, I think. But in the meantime, if we run on the assumption that there isn't going to be a deal in place by the end of the transition period, and it seems impossible to arrange one now, because let's say a deal were agreed on Sunday. Let's think about that. So the EU Parliament agreed a special sit-in, it was very good of them, an emergency sit-in on the 28th of December. Can't imagine our Parliament doing something like that. But that would give them 15 days. 15 days to get all the translations and committee stages done. No. I mean, really, it takes 6 weeks. They were willing, I think, to rush that a little bit. But you can't get all that done in 15 days. And bear in mind, some of those 15 days are Christmas. So no, it's not possible for the EU. You'd need to hear from representatives of the EU Parliament themselves, but that's surely not possible. Not enough time. I don't see the EU Parliament being willing to say that it's possible to do that now. So as far as I'm concerned, if there were to be a deal, the best we can hope for now is that the deal would be ratified, let's say, early to mid-January, but with a light touch applied to the checks that take place in early January, in order to smooth out some of the Brexit chaos, because a deal's coming anyway. But assuming that doesn't happen, and I don't think it will happen, then Johnson has a tricky situation to manage, because I am satisfied that he doesn't know I'm satisfied that he does know he can't survive long into 2021 without a deal. And when I say not long, I don't mean like a few months, I mean even a few weeks. The carryover deals that the government keep announcing, which are copied EU trade deals, which actually all they really do is remind us just how many trade deals we had as EU members. They're small fry in comparison with our trade with the EU and the US, and of course he can't get a US trade deal in the whole of this current parliament. Even if he were in charge for the whole of it, he's not getting a US trade deal. That's all there is to it. He can't live on the carry-on deals. I mean, not only are they not improvements on the EU deals, but even if they were, they are worth a relatively small amount of our total trade. You know, Johnson has threatened to end talks if there's no deal. He said there will be no talks in 2021, come what may. Now, okay, he said things like that before and he's backed down. But if he says it strongly enough and often enough and loudly enough to the point where it's out in the public and the average member of the public knows that Boris Johnson has said that, I mean, if talks then do stop, then there's no way of starting them up again without it being noticed. And if they do start up again, against a background of major civil unrest, shortages of food, medicines and chemicals needed to treat our drinking water, to say nothing of bog roll, then it's going to look like the mother of all climb downs from Johnson's government. It can't not. I mean, wouldn't it be better politically for him to keep the talks going? You know, he still gets to say that we'll manage without a deal, but that we prefer a deal. After all, his line is not that a no deal is the best outcome. It is from some Brexiteers, not from Boris Johnson. If his line was no deal was the best outcome, then why is he carrying on? Why is he pretending to go to efforts to get a deal? You know, why would he go to the trouble of going to Belgium for some foreign food, having to fly in a plane that didn't even have a gaudy Union flag draped all over it, and also suffering the indignity of not being able to find a British car to make the final leg of his journey? I mean, for him, that's serious effort. You know, he doesn't get to say that a no deal is the best outcome. He gets to say, oh, a bad deal is worse than a no deal. All right, he can say that if he wants. But by putting all this pretend effort into getting a deal, he's saying that a good deal is the best outcome. So why would he stop pursuing the best outcome for Britain? Because that's what he's doing. If he cancels talks, he's saying, I am no longer interested in the best outcome for Britain. Or he's saying, I am incapable of delivering the best outcome for Britain. Are those really things that he wants people to level at him? No. So, you know, what to do. Like all of the Brexiteers do, I suppose, what he may want to do is, if he, like, let's say he knows his time's up anyway. I know we've had all the little off-the-record talks about him resigning next year anyway. Let's say that's the thing. Let's say he intends to do that and he's not just going to be forced out. Or if he is going to be forced out, but he knows he is. Let us imagine that he knows his time's up, so he's going to go ahead with the no deal, deliver the chaos, resign, and then spend his retirement. You know, let his successor be the one who has to go crawling to the EU, and he can spend his retirement saying, actually, no deal would have been absolutely fine. Yes, of course, there was some pain at the start, but if they'd have just got through that, if they'd have just faced it down, if they'd have just had a good old British backbone, then it would have all been fine come 2022. Just get through 2021. We already had the pain of 2020 with COVID. We came through that. We would have come through the no-deal Brexit, and he'll get to carry on saying that for the rest of his life, because that is what all Brexiteers want to do ultimately. Say how great it would have been if only you'd have done what they said, even though the things they said were completely contradictory, because they say almost everything. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.